Go ahead, Steve. Every once in a while, you can hear that voice again. That voice you didn't expect or didn't know would come. But that is a voice we want to hear. So I'll begin by telling you about my grandfather, Edward Leon's voice. He was a giant in every way, shape, and form to the end. In fact, the story goes, they had to dig his grave 6 inches deeper just to fit him in. He was a state representative for 16 years from Wolf Point, Montana, in Montana's Congressional House. He was a homesteader, a farmer, a father, a husband, a lover, a poet, comedian, friend, and a louse. And he was a good man. And he chose to do those things, to become that man, because he wanted others to have the same opportunity that he was given. He wanted to help others find a way to use their voice the way he could. So he used his time in the House to help spearhead bills that gave women and the marginalized in Montana their fair shake. So then it's not much of a coincidence that later in life, his eldest son came out as trans. And now this coincidence begins to start to turn into something more like fate, or whatever word for inevitability that you'd use if you were telling this story. So when Zoe Zephyr, the first trans representative elected into Montana's House, took her seat, she sat at the same desk my grandfather sat, and she carved her name right next to his into that same wood. And that is no coincidence. So when you hear a voice like that, that's been given so much gravity, it just seems to come from you, with you, through you, since the beginning, you have to learn how to temper that voice. You have to learn how to speak into the spaces and to be soft in your power so that no power is lost. And that's what my grandfather taught me, to speak into the spaces, and that tempered power is power times 10. So the story goes to Hawaii now, and I got there like I always do, with no real plan, intention, thought, or line of sight. I bought a one-way ticket on a Tuesday, left that Friday, and that's 15 years of my life. I fell in love, out of love, got in fights, learned lessons, the easy and the hard ways, but I stuck it out. I became a dive instructor and a boat captain, and I saw some of the most unimaginably beautiful places, creatures, moments, and peace that most alive will never get to experience. And because I stuck it out, my grandfather got to check that last box off his bucket list. Because I stuck it out, I like to think I allowed that to be fulfilled. Ed's older brother died in World War II, and he was buried on Oahu. And Ed, he would always muse about making that pilgrimage, about getting to say goodbye to his older brother one more time before he passed. And in the end, as Ed was going out, I saw Ed become a lot softer than I'd always seen him before. I always saw him as so demanding, so imposing, because in his exceptionalism, he didn't need to say a thing for you to just know what excellence was. But when we were kids, when he'd read Kipling aloud to us before bedtime, and he'd use that booming presence to playfully say, "Ricky, ticky, tick," it was one of the best things us kids had ever heard. It was so incongruent to his might that it just caught you by surprise. But that playfulness, I'll never forget it. In fact, I can still hear him saying that right now, right here, "Ricky, ticky, tick." And it comes from the breeze, from the edge of that farm, through the halls of that house, to where his winter wheat would run away to the sky in the wind. And that's how I know he's sitting there on the bank of that other side, looking back at me and laughing, because he had a way to find the best view. So here's what I've realized. Once you start opening your eyes, you don't see things the way you used to. The seasons in Hawaii, for example, are almost imperceptible at first, but they exist as exact and as powerful and as clear as any season in any place on this planet. And in winter, in Hawaii, the whales arrive, the great beasts. And the thing about the great things in life is that you feel them before they're near. They're felt before they're seen. The ocean, your first or last lover, the softest thing you've ever touched. You feel things like these before you hold them. So once you get used to seeing the whales in wintertime in Hawaii, you find yourself looking out to the sea in spring and summer. And there's some strange compulsion or instinct inside of you that just expects them to appear. Even though rationally, you know that they're thousands of miles away in Alaska. But still, you look, and still, you kind of see them because you feel them. Because if you've ever heard a whale sing, or a voice like my grandfather used, you feel it reverberate from the middle, from the center, from the cavity of your being. It becomes a part of you. So now I can hear my grandfather's voice in the spaces between all I say. And if I could say anything to him now, it wouldn't be that bullshit eulogy I wrote years after he died, or what I would have said if I was there when he did. Because in moments like those, you want to say everything, but there's just too many words in the way. That truth you want to speak if you could, it only exists in its feeling. So my grandfather's hearing now, just as you're hearing this story, is simply me saying, I see you, Grandpa. And when you see me again, you'll see in me a lot of you. So thank you, everybody.